Hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar hosted by Attuned. So we're going to share our screen with you so you can see what we are talking about. I hope everybody out there in webinar land can see. So today we're going to be talking about truly motivating one-on-ones. I will be your host, Casey. I'm the CEO of Attuned here. And I'm also joined by Christine, who's head of talent in development at Wall & Case, one of Attuned's customers.
Hi, everyone.
So we're going to start from the basis point that all of you value one-on-ones, and we know the importance of one-on-ones, and we think they're key tools of the organization and ensure to get the best out of your employees. And it's something that I've used for years. I think Wall & Case has used it for years. The organizations we've both been in have used it for many years. Sometimes successfully, sometimes not so successfully. So personally, I calculated the other day and I spent 2,880 hours in one-on-ones.
Not a small number.
Over 15 years. So if you put that all back, that's 4 months of no sleep, no eating, no breaks, and one-on-ones. That's a lot of my life. 120 sleepless days of one-on-one. So there's a lot of residual one-on-one experience that I've got, and hopefully we can share this with everybody to get the most productive out of it. And what I thought worked during all of those 2,880 hours were, we could set chat. So if we're doing a weekly one-on-one, you're setting the task for the team. You're checking in, how's your week going? How was the last week? What's going well? What's not going so well? Often you're doing one-on-ones with more junior staff, quite often new starters, so you're trying to mentor them, take them through the hurdles and the difficulties that they're experiencing. It's a good thing to do semi-real-time feedback. Ideally, when you're sitting with people on the desk, that you want to give them real-time feedback is always the best way, I think, to get feedback, especially if it's constructive criticism and you're trying to change slight behaviors so they'll be more productive. But oftentimes, we're not there as managers or leaders, and we see things. So if we're doing one-on-ones every week or bi-weekly, we have a semi-real-time feedback loop that goes on. And then, of course, tracking accountability. Sorry for the mistype there. It's not tracking, it is tracking. And you can follow up to see that what your team's commits from the previous week or since the previous one-on-ones are, and how well they're doing that. So you're starting to see accountability, how well people are actually following through on what they commit to. And in those 2,880 hours I've spent in one-on-ones, I felt these things were relatively straightforward. You could use Google Docs, you kind of write down what your discussion was. Maybe you have them email sometime with what their commits are. Christina, as you've sat through and given one-on-ones, is your kind of experience about what worked similar?
I think so, and I'm glad that you mentioned that the tools that you need to achieve these points doesn't have to be anything fancy. You don't need a complex goal-setting software tool that you're using. But in terms of setting tasks and tackling accountability, I think that something like a Google Doc is an easy tool to use because both members can contribute to the agenda, and you can access it throughout the week or the time in between one-on-ones. So that you're able to reference back to it and everyone's on the same page. I noticed you said semi-real-time feedback, and you talked a little bit more about giving that feedback maybe sometimes more quickly on the desk. Are there situations where you would hold back, where it's better to delay the feedback a little bit, or do you want it to be?
I think it's a good question. Maybe something, at least for me, is you didn't necessarily have the right words to articulate, or maybe it was kind of a feeling and you saw a different couple of behaviors over the course of a week or course of a couple of weeks that were trending and you wanted to do it. I think maybe if they're speaking to a customer and they used different words than you wanted, or they were engaging in a project and kind of doing kind of the steps of it a little bit different, then you can give it there. But maybe if it's more personal and it's really trying to change the behavior or maybe addressing kind of a personality issue type of thing, a little bit more sensitive, rather than say, hey, can we go out and have a talk and make a big deal of it, where the team, especially if you're sitting in open offices, see the two of you leave and wonder
Right.
what's going to be going on. What are they talking about? And then it becomes too strong of a reaction for that person, and it doesn't quite match. But it's, hey, it's something that probably should be changed. We should have a little bit of a conversation here. And it's not just me telling them what to fix, but I want to lead with asking questions. Of course, in one-on-ones, you should always be asking questions a lot as well.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point, and it's something that when we have new managers or when I've spoken to people who are transitioning to doing one-on-ones for the first time, it's one of the big questions that they have. What is the right time to address something on the spot? What is the right time to hold back? And I think that making sure you have a good reason for delaying the feedback is important. You don't want to just store all of your feedback up until you have that one-on-one. So trying to do it as close to the action as possible definitely has the biggest impact.
That's good feedback for me. I don't know if it's real time or if it's semi-real time, quite delayed, but yeah, I could have used that. But what I felt really didn't work, and I think I wasted hundreds of hours, is I didn't really know how to engage each individual member. I would think I'd miss their motivator. So when they started out with me and with the kind of organization, everybody, hey, we want to make the best of this relationships. We're giving our best in the one-on-ones. We're trying. But what I would find is just as often as it went well, it just kind of, the other half of the time, we got into this rut. And it would just be a repeat of, okay, we're checking in, I'm trying to mentor, we're giving tasks, but their performance is kind of flatlining. It's plateauing. And what my job as a manager was is, okay, how can I raise their performance? I believe in them. I think they have the skills and the potential to be much better, but I'm not getting this out of them. So I'm trying to motivate, coming up with different incentives, challenge them to do things. And so many times it didn't seem to work. And, we're 3, 4, 5 cycles of one-on-ones, and okay, I've tried motivating them like this, I've tried motivating them like this, nothing gets there. And then I'm starting to become frustrated as a manager.
Trying to guess what those motivations are.
I don't even think I could articulate it that much. Like, okay, how can I get this person to have higher productivity? And I didn't know what to do. And I think it would just be like this lingering frustration on my side, and I'm sure they felt it as well. It's like, why is this guy just keep telling me the same things, or he's trying all these, doesn't he understand what I need?
It's a really difficult balance to strike, because you want to have a little bit of a pattern or a routine so that you do have that accountability pattern, right? Like you set the goals, you confirm how the performance was on them, what needs to change, what needs to improve. But if you do it the exact same way week in and week out, then there's nothing that's very intellectually stimulating for either person, and you're potentially missing something that just isn't a part of your routine. So I can understand that, and I'm sure you're not the only person who's run one-on-one who's ever felt that way.
And what I found as a manager over the last 15 years running these is probably around 18 months is when I would start to understand somebody, maybe between 12 to 18 months, depending on the complexity. Oh, okay, this is, if I push these buttons or I say this thing, this is what really gets them excited, gets the sparkle in their eye. Or if I say these things, it just absolutely doesn't work, and I should give up on these type of incentives.
It's a long lead time.
Right? A lot of wasted time, and some people are starting to leave the organization at that point because I wasn't keeping them very well motivated. How was your experience?
I think that it can probably depend. You said sometimes it clicks and sometimes it doesn't, and some of that might come down to like the manager and the team member already having some similarities that are really easily recognizable to the other, even if it's subconsciously, and they just kind of know how to get along with each other. They're communicating openly. There's a lot of initial trust. But I think that those situations, as fantastic as they are probably not the most common scenarios. And I think that having that lead time, not just to understand the person, but maybe for them to really open up and understand you as a manager, or understand the company enough to know how they want to articulate their goals or what is expected of them in the meetings. I can understand that taking quite a bit of time.
Well, that's really interesting. And, I think that point about sometimes you just hit it off and this person's great, and it's because you have a similar type. But the times you don't, and those were the ones where it kind of fell flat. And this is really what we want to look at today in our webinar, is those people that aren't the natural types to you, that, hey, you just got lucky and for some reason we're just clicking here.
Right.
How do you motivate the rest of your team? And you're going to have that through your career. So we're going to be looking at this through the lens of Attune, which is really looking at people's intrinsic motivations here. So what this does, if our members out there who haven't used Attune, is if you look at the lower right-hand part of your screen, it says values and motivators, is we're understanding people's values, and there's a strong research link in science connecting people's values to their motivations toward work. So this is my actual intrinsic motivator chart that everybody can see right now. So we are a transparent company. Transparency is one of our corporate values, but my motivation is competition and autonomy, and like security is not very high, or social relationships are not very high for me as feedback. So as a lens that we're going to start looking at some different profiles, try to remember this is Casey's motivators, and try to guess, because they're not going to be on the same screen, is how's this guy going to interact with these people? So kind of moving on. So this is a team member that's kind of been involved in one-on-ones and managing before. So switching between the screens is, okay, you've got competition really high for me, high autonomy. Feedback is my lowest. This person has 90% feedback. It's a need to have for them. It's something that they have to be motivated. So the questions is, how would you manage this person?
I think that it's really interesting profile, because when you have this needs to have that's so strong, and maybe not a lot of others, I would probably look at that and say, okay, it's really clear what the hot button is for this person, that if you're able to engage them on this most critical needs to have motivator, then you can probably go far in helping to keep them engaged. And if you're not doing that, you risk disengaging them. And the way Attune looked at feedback is both sides of the coin. These people who have a very high need to have feedback score probably are looking for positive reinforcement as well as constructive criticism, and they'll weigh the opinions of those around them. But I would guess their direct managers especially heavily. So I think being conscious of what you're saying and how, maybe what that golden balance is between the catching them doing things right and giving the positive reinforcement, and making sure you're approaching other feedback really constructively, I think would be pretty key.
So for somebody like me, again, we'll go back really quickly. So I've got high competition. Probably what I'm going to be doing is driving them through a competitive one. Say, okay, last week you did this many sales and you met this many customer appointments. Why this week, let's go, 20% higher, you can do it. This other member here. How do you think that would fall with this person?
I think that you not necessarily put them off. I mean, competition shows up and they're nice to have, but you'd be leaving this gaping hole where they're really looking for more context in the feedback that you're getting, and maybe just the performance facts and figures would not be enough to fully engage them. So I think as a manager, your challenge is to try to think of things from their perspective. And it won't be natural for you to see the same situation in exactly the same light. So it has to definitely be a conscious decision to address that.
Interesting. And I think before we had Attune, it would take me 18 months to really understand, and I would have gone through everything. So for me, again, competition is high, autonomy is high. So for this person, competition, and probably if I'm doing a one-on-one with them, sometimes they're kind of engaged, or they'll shake their head, they'll smile a little bit, but then the performance doesn't kind of really drive through. And especially autonomy, where it's, okay, here's our goal. We want to achieve this as a group. I don't want to micromanage you, so why don't you kind of figure out how you go through the problem? But this person's got 2% autonomy. So,
yeah, they don't need that.
So probably they want lots of structure, and to a certain degree, rather than I'm willing to give them, my natural default mode is to be quite hands-off. Let's go hit this big picture together. You're a smart, really person. You probably went to a good school, type of thing like that. Please figure it out. And if they're coming back to me and say, okay, maybe they're not even articulating it so well. I need a little bit more direction, kind of breaking it down. And I guess I'd probably get frustrated. So I'd say this person
could be a challenge for you.
This person would be really hard for me. And, you know, as feedback is quite high, you talked about that.
Yeah.
That's both a little bit of rah kind of, you know, we're doing really well as a group, and I'm kind of one of those quiet.
Yeah.
All right, good job. That's you know, comes every 3 months, once in a while, or
yeah. And I think you talked about autonomy, and security is higher for this person by several stages. Even though it sits in that middle nice to have section for them, it's still in their top 6 motivators. So it's something that affects their engagement you want to keep an eye on. And someone who likes security or has it as a need to have welcomes structure and systems and being plugged into processes, might not object to being trained on doing things a specific way, and being expected to follow those rules. And where you're very high on autonomy, you're very high on innovation, you're kind of forging a new path, it's quite natural for you to try and think of a new way or do things a little bit differently based on the situation. That could also be quite different from how this person is looking at the situation. Since they only have this one needs to have, I did also want to mention that looking at their progress and financial needs is probably important too. Where someone doesn't have a lot of needs to have, looking at their nice to have helps. So I think, you know, progress is looking at learning new things, financial needs this person might value, especially in a sales organization, measuring performance against revenue or understanding what they need to get promoted or to get a raise. And so those could be things that would be good to address with them. And those are not necessarily your highest motivators either, from my memory of your profile. So I think that this person is almost a flip to what your profile looks like, and being really conscious about thinking through their motivators will probably be critical to engaging them in one-on-ones.
So how long do you think they would last with me?
I think that it would depend. You don't have to be a perfect match to manage someone successfully, but I think having an open conversation about what your differences are might help to minimize a mismatch in expectations. Like we talked about potential frustration, but if you say to this person really early on, this is what my profile looks like, this is what your profile looks like, we're going to come at the same things from 2 totally different directions, and I might not always meet you where you're expecting things to be. So let me know, you know, open up that dialogue. And I think that can empower people, especially when they have a new manager, they're quite junior, to say, hey, you're not giving me the structure that I need here, or I don't need another competitive challenge. What I really want to know is how I did in that meeting. So this might give them the tools to be a little bit more empowered and to tell you more of what they need from you, to articulate that.
Absolutely. I'm totally a believer in Attuned, and now that we have this, you can see people's intrinsic motivations very, very quickly, like as soon as they join, before they join as a part of that. But in those 14 years of my management life that I didn't have it, what do you think would have happened to this? I would have been going through the dark, trying to feel my way through, and just getting it wrong more often than not. And I'm sure this person, they probably spend a lot of time hiring them, maybe spend money paying a fee to hire them, a lot of onboarding, probably a lot of offsites that we've done and training. I don't think they would have lasted that long.
You might have been speaking different languages.
Wow. Okay, well, let's go on. Let's try another one. So I think we're getting into this. So what do you see on this person? So our team member B.
A lot of needs to have. Excuse me. So yeah, you can instantly know their drivers, as you said here. It pulls it out. It's pretty straightforward what this person wants or needs in a role. It gives you, I guess, a pretty clear map for what you might need to do to engage them. But I think it's also a little bit harder to fully engage someone if the absence of any of these really 6 things could contribute to them feeling like there's a gap or a need that's not being met.
Yeah, I think you're right. So like if we have this, and probably had I not had Attuned, and I was kind of trying to one-on-ones and motivate this person, you know, craft their job structure and craft incentive plans for them, more often than not, I probably hit something. Right? You know, okay, we're innovative, we're creative, competition, it's like an easy one for me.
Yeah.
Progress, okay, you know, I can imagine everybody wants to go through the career and step up. Altruism, I probably could feel that they like helping their team. So, okay, let's talk about how this helps with the team. So I would get those. So yeah, I probably find language that resonates from time to time, but you're right, it's like complex.
Yeah.
And probably you can't hit one of these, motivators too much. And how do you deal with somebody who has so many kind of need to have? Are there kind of risks that you have here, or?
I think the idea behind it needs to have is that where it's absent, then the difficulty in actively engaging that person or maintaining their engagement can be really difficult. So you can look at it on the one side of the coin and say, well, I know all of the things that will help me to motivate this person. Maybe there's a lot of different options or cards I can use in different, make sure that I'm touching on something that helps to excite them. But the opportunity to miss something, I think is higher when there's that many motivators as well.
Yeah, and I think you pretty much got it exactly right there. Is probably as a manager, had I not had Attuned, I'd be like, yeah, I got this person. I understand what's working. They're motivated. Most likely they've got a lot of drive to them. They really want to progress in their career. They're quite competitive. They want to get high status. They like helping their team. So I'd be like, yeah, this person's doing great. They're progressing. They're always bringing a lot of energy and kind of a lot of fire and drive to the position. But I would probably miss one. And probably where status might be a little bit lower for me and security is much lower, that I wouldn't understand these persons so well. And I think, okay, they have high innovation, and I'm probably picking up on these things. They're quite creative. They like trying new things. They want to go through their career. So I'm probably trying to give them a lot of challenges. But if their security is high, maybe they don't want to switch so quickly. Maybe they like having a new task within their current job role rather than just completely crashing everything and say, hey, you go run this new project and I think you're motivated by this. And I would have just stepped in that landmine, I think, right?
Yeah, when I think about innovation, I often think about trying new approaches, having a little bit of, I guess, a dynamic ability to try new things and to express yourself. And when I think of security, I think about continuity and processes. So immediately when I look at this, I think, oh, are these in conflict with one another? And it actually took me back to looking at some of our definitions of these motivators to say, okay, innovation can also be really motivated by like leaving a mark, by building something. And so in some ways that might be more in line with other motivators than I might initially think. So even within these motivator definitions themselves, there's a lot of complexity and different layers, and it might not be every component of that motivator that, I guess, appeals to that person or speaks to them. So sometimes even working within those to find really what it is that person is excited about. In the context of status, is it that they want to be really proud of their brand and proud of their team, and that ties into altruism and wanting to have an environment that's really productive and where people are helping each other? Is it they want to get promoted and that kind of works together with promotion? Or is there some other element of it? And until you really have the opportunity to learn someone and maybe even discuss these things with them, it can all be a little bit of guesswork.
And I think that really drives home to what we created it to, and what we're trying to do is, bring real data and science to the art of management. And I think management gets a knock, but it's so complex, right?
Absolutely.
All these individuals have different drivers, they have different personalities, which is different from their motivations, they have different behaviors. So kind of figuring out way out through all of this without this data was really difficult, I think, until Attuned here. So we're trying to bring some of the IQ of tech and science to the EQ and emotional intelligence of management.
It's a totally different starting point.
Yeah. So I think we're on a roll here. So let's go to team member C and look at these. So what we found with Attuned is there's 177,000 plus different motivational profiles that you can have, how all of these different motivators can add up into different complexity. So that's why it's all complex. So with this person, it looks like we're going a little bit simpler, maybe. A little bit simpler, maybe. So what's jumping out to you here?
This person has a lot in the needs to have column, which I always read as flexibility. Like these things are not going to put them off if they have a lot of it or don't have too much of it, but they'll kind of welcome it. Their financial needs, status, and innovation are pretty clearly in their needs to have. So you'd start by really addressing those. But thinking of your profile, again, there's a lot of differences between you and this person. Maybe innovation is the one motivator that you have in common towards the top of both of your charts. But I would look at this profile and I would think financial needs, status. If I was thinking about what incentives or kind of carrot to really use in the conversation with this person, I would probably think about what do they need to get promoted, what do they need to hit bonus, what do they need to move forward in their career, to get a raise. And I think I would probably start there if I had to guess.
So if you're doing one-on-ones with this person, let's say you had the ability to craft kind of different specific incentives, what would they be like for this person?
I think something that is maybe tied to, if they're in a sales role, something that's tied to revenue can be in line with a high need to have in financial needs, but something that will get them an increase in title or a bonus. So depending on what the company's structures are, and make sure that they have a really clear idea of what they need to do. And in one-on-ones, I would probably check in on how their performance is and what are the things that they want to focus on that will help them get closer to those goals, as it looks like it would be the thing that would really drive them.
And what do you think we could ignore? So like we're talking to them, maybe we're getting to a point in the plateau of their performance where we're trying to get something else out of here. And you're saying, okay, we can make some kind of financial incentives to a certain degree. There's certainly promotion incentives, or maybe we can recognize them publicly. Something that'll go there. Or maybe a new task or a new responsibility are pretty clear. But what should we kind of avoid with this person? What incentives or kind of motivational techniques wouldn't resonate and just be a waste of our voice?
Well, altruism and social relationships come up pretty low for this person. So I don't know that I would say to them like, oh, if you achieve these goals, then you'll get to run the mentorship program or something like that. It might not be the most exciting role for them, because being low in altruism or social relationships doesn't mean that they don't care about the people around them or they don't want to help their teammates. But without that, they're not going to be any less engaged. So rather than focus my energy on something that's not going to move their engagement forward, I would focus it on the types of things I think most likely to energize them.
Interesting. So like, on social relationships, say, hey, if you hit your targets over the course of this month, we're going to go out and have a big party type of thing like that. We're all going to get together, have a big powwow. Would that motivate them, or?
I guess probably not.
Okay. But I thought it was a good point that, personality is different than the motivators. And even if somebody's altruism is low or social relationship, it's not a need to have in the workplace, but they could still be outgoing people per se.
Yeah,
or
could
very
be friendly.
kind and very generous, right?
Absolutely.
They just don't need to come to work to have conversations.
Absolutely.
They want to go out and get financial needs. So, great point. And here's our new hire. What do we think? How is this person going to meld with me?
Wow, they're pretty close to your profile right off the bat. I think that there's some things that you have in common. Competition, autonomy, rationality are in your top 4.
Awesome.
So,
awesome. I think we just hired perfectly.
Yeah, I think this might be why you like this guy so much.
It's a mini me. So yeah, I guess you can use this in hiring as well. So the hiring is kind of the first step to one-on-one. So do you want to have people that have the same motivations to you?
I think that you don't want to exclude any profile, whether it's like you or not. I think having some diversity in the motivator profiles is definitely not a bad thing. I think the awareness of that diversity is more important than minimizing it.
Cool. So I think we agree our new hire, probably the one-on-ones are going to go well.
Yeah,
we can do all the check-ins.
You probably have a good guess to how to get the ball rolling with them.
And kind of stepping with the next part of Attuned is you can actually see the gaps on the dashboard between all the members on a single team. So what I've done here is I put in purple as my motivations. On the right-hand side is the high need to have between those kind of dotted lines. In the middle is kind of nice to have. And on the left-hand side is what people don't need as their motivator. So again, the purple one's me. So if we mapped out a whole team culture, these are maybe some of the profiles that we just looked at, you can start to see where the gaps are. Right, so this isn't necessarily for one-on-ones, but okay, as I'm maybe talking within the team meeting or specific members here, I can very visually see I probably need to approach conversations with this person very differently.
Yes, at least consciously.
Yeah.
This is one of my favorite graphs. I'm sorry, I got you.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
But I think that's one of my favorite graphs inside the Attuned dashboard. It's really a useful one. And even as we roll it out within Will & Case, we've been using it a lot for the managers as they're looking at their team and in one-on-ones, even at a more senior level, we talk about them a lot.
So we've been using 11 different motivational kind of triggers throughout the whole conversation today. So for everybody that's listening and those that'll be listening later, we have all of the motivator cards that actually describe what everything stands for. So altruism is here on the screen right now, and what the expressions of it mean, and what a neutral score, a nice to have score need to have. So if you start using these type of motivators and value drivers in your one-on-ones, you'll have the language that will motivate you. So you can get in contact us, just send us an email or chat, and we'll be happy to send these over to you. How does Will & Case use motivation in one-on-ones? Like, what is the stage of?
It's a good question. Will & Case introduced Attuned early in its iterations, and I think we really rolled it out as a company towards the beginning of this year. And as we have been introducing it, I think probably our biggest challenge has been increasing like internal literacy of the motivators and trying to make sure that people understand their own profiles, that managers understand how to use the profiles, so that we're able to utilize them in a lot of the ways that we've discussed today. And I think one of the biggest challenges is that personality, trait, behavior, connection versus the motivator. Something like altruism, or I hear it a lot with rationality. Someone will come to me and say, Christine, I need to take this again because my rationality score is too low. I'm a rational person, I'm logical, I use data when I make decisions, and this makes me look like, I'm just flying off the handle all the time. I feel like this isn't me. So over the course of this year, one of the things that we've been doing work on is helping to make sure that this language is a common language. So we have these terms, we have these cards, but making sure that when people see altruism, they're understanding it the same way. And I think that we're getting to a point now where people do understand that, okay, even if rationality comes up low in my motivator report, it doesn't mean I'm not a rational person. It just means that I don't need a lot of this maybe database decision making in my job in order to be engaged and fulfilled in my work. So I think that we've moved to the point where we're talking more about the kind of gaps in the team, understanding the team culture. First step is probably for managers to understand those things and start thinking about how the knowledge that they're getting from Attuned can help to inform the way that they approach their one-on-ones. Are there things that they naturally miss because it's different from their own kind of lens on the situation that they can be more conscious about addressing for certain people, to have that discussion, to show the profiles together and say, this is what mine looks like, this is what yours looks like, what do you think about this? Is there a need that I'm not meeting that you're experiencing that would support what we're seeing in these? And then we're also looking at them in terms of how team members understand each other as well. What I find is that sometimes the tension in a team can be from people having two totally different sets of expectations. And social relationships is one that comes to mind. You'll have a team where one or two people are at an extreme end of that. And I imagine a Monday morning, you're low on social relationships, I'm relatively low on social relationships. So you and I might come in and say, hey, how was your weekend? It was good. And then we're doing our work. But the third person for whom social relationships at work are really important comes in and they're like, hey, how was your weekend? And we give them, yeah, it was good. And we're head back down again. We're potentially missing something that person really wants or needs in their work environment. And so even if they're getting it from their manager, they might not be getting it from us. It still leads to tension on the desk. So I think after people understand themselves and managers start to work with their team members so they can understand each other, team members understanding the team dynamic and being able to leverage this vocabulary, these motivators, these concepts with each other, I think it makes it easier to articulate the kinds of things that can just lead to people feeling like something isn't right. Yeah, they're just frustrated, they're not excited to be there, they don't really know why. And sometimes if you can put words to it, you can fix it, or you can start to address it. You can say like, oh, I'm realizing I come in and I want to feel like I'm really connecting with people and we're genuine friends and that our connection goes beyond work, and I'm not getting that from anybody. Maybe it doesn't change everything, but you and I can make a little more effort to have a chat with them and to connect with them on a more personal level.
Well, at least we know where they're coming from.
Exactly.
Right? And I think when you don't understand, you don't have the common language, and a lot of us, our self-awareness isn't that great, even if we are in management or leadership.
Absolutely.
But it's good that Wall and Casey is starting to be self-aware across and starting to use a vocabulary, because I think you kind of change away from like emotional, you get away from these emotional feelings and conversations. So going back to like what you're talking about, social relationships, again, not something necessarily for me, but through my one-on-ones in the past, maybe that's a frustration that really came out, and in person might stop liking me because I'm not that engaging about how their weekend was per se.
And it might not even be something that they're consciously recognizing, but when you sit down and you look at it and you're talking about it with the same vocabulary, sometimes it just clicks. People say, that it's that thing. Oh my God, now that you mention it, that drives me crazy. I hate that we don't do this. You can say, okay, well, we can more consciously try to address that. So it's vocabulary, but it's also tools for
exactly. And now you have the data and say, okay, it's objective, it's based on science. All right, I get it. It's not only just you telling me I need feedback.
Exactly.
I can see what's going on. So.
You can engage the people at that rational end of the spectrum to into some of these concepts as well, because you do have that hard data right in front of them.
So it sounds like Wall and Case is a pretty sophisticated, self-aware organization. So how well are your one-on-ones going?
I think that there's still a lot of work to be done. I wouldn't necessarily credit us as being fully self-aware, but we are trying, and I think that's the big first step always. I think one-on-ones probably vary still a bit by the person who's leading them, as well as the person who is participating as the non-manager. But we are working towards sharing a lot of best practices within the team and trying to elicit feedback that will help to make it a better experience. So we're trying, which is what we can do so far.
That's excellent, excellent. And I'm glad you're using Attune. So for everybody on the webinar, if you are interested in finding your own motivators, if you want to know thyself, you can go to attune.ai. You can sign up for a free trial there. You can have up to 5 members, I believe. So you can start to see what's going on. If you want to try these with your one-on-ones, you don't have to pay for anything. But that first part of knowing yourself and knowing your team members to do all of these things, you can do that for free. And that is the end of our presentation. So what we're going to do is we're going to move over to some questions right now. So the screen's going to get a little bit blurry while we open it up for the questions. So please bear with us. All right, so it's question time.
All right, so question number 1 from Elena is, what tests and instruments do you use to define the motivations?
That's a good question. Thank you, Elena. So Attuned is based on, it's actually public research that's been around in different kind of psychology departments, and it's published in peer-reviewed journals that we've put together to understand people's values. So what it is, it's a 55-question web questionnaire, so you can take it on the web or your mobile phone, and it lasts about 10 to 15 minutes, and we're finding each individual's values. And the linkage between those questions, it's based on a whole lot of data. So we've had thousands and thousands of people take this. So we've done quite a large statistical analysis and data analysis of this to understand exactly how the questions match to people's values, and those values match to the motivations.
And the second question following up from Elena is, when doing one-on-ones and your coworker is not very open and honest with you, what steps do you take to make that person open up?
That's a good question. Christine, you want to take a first swing at this one?
I'm curious, I don't know, Elena, if you're still tuned in, what would indicate to you that the person is not being open and honest? Like, is it that you have concrete, I don't know, feedback, you have a feeling that there's a challenge that they're not raising? I wonder if you can give any additional insight into that. But in terms of what you can do to help make that person open up, I think that you can probably start by stepping back and thinking about how you're approaching the one-on-ones, and if there's something in your approach that you might change that could connect with them a little bit better. Is there anything that you might accidentally be doing to limit their responses? Maybe you're asking a lot of closed or direct questions at the beginning of the conversation. You can start a little bit bigger with more open-ended questions to get them talking. Another thing that we see sometimes that can come up when I hear frustration from managers that there's not a lot of give and take in one-on-ones is that they have an agenda and they're just diving into it, and they just kind of talk and talk and talk, cover all the points they want to cover, and it's not really until the end where they say, anything from you? And by then, depending on what's happened, the person might just be done with the meeting and ready to go and not say anything. So maybe starting with opening up for their questions a little bit early on can help to get the conversation going.
I think that's good, and generally as a manager in one-on-ones, you want to be asking questions and doing less talking. So the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle always comes in, where probably the person you're having the one-on-one with should be doing 80% of the talking, and you're doing 20% of the talking, which means you're going to have to ask questions. And I would go with the 5 whys. You know, if somebody says something, you ask, okay, well, why do you think like that? Or why did you come to that conclusion? And keep digging and digging and digging. And I think it'll be harder for them to really try to cover up or be less transparent if you kind of ask why. And if you do it with an open approach where you're really just trying to understand, you can do it from that side. I guess if people are not being forthcoming, it can probably take a lot of different things. Are they not being forthcoming about the obstacles they have, or how engaged they are, or what are the problems on the team? And maybe sometimes those could be a little bit harder to deal with, and maybe one-on-one, which in some organizations can be quite formal, can be hard to get that information out. And maybe it's good for a walk around the block or a coffee or something else to get those. If it's lack of transparency about stuff on the job and maybe results and stuff, then I think you've got a deeper problem. If you're looking at that, where they're trying to cover up, maybe competency issues as well. So it kind of really comes there. But I think the first part is questions. Ask as many questions as you possibly can. Keep it to 80-20. And then second thing is keep one-on-ones fresh. You don't always have to do it in the same room or on the same day. Mix it up a little bit. Mix up the venues. I'm a big believer in walking. When you walk around, it gets your limbic brain moving, and people tend to talk differently at that point as well.
Definitely. Elena, you said that the answers are short and common, and I think that this advice from Casey just now to change things up physically, change your agenda, start a fresh document, do something to shake it up a little bit and see if you can get a little bit of a shift in the tone of the meeting. It might help to change what kind of responses you're getting as well.
Yeah. This is just an idea. Maybe have them lead the one-on-one, right?
Yeah.
See what happens that way too. So thanks for the question, Elena.
Next we have from Paul. Is there any relationship between the intrinsic motivations and the MBTI Big 5 type personality assessments?
No, there basically is not. We're looking at a different psychological aspect there. So personality, a lot of it is based on DNA. There's still a debate within the scientific community as how much is DNA and genetically related and how much is environment related. But basically personality is how you react to stimulus. It's if the world does something to you, how's your natural reaction to that? What we're looking at is your values, and values are actually a learned part of your psychological profile. Pretty much it comes from your childhood and your formative experiences. They can change a little bit later on in life if there are big different life changes, or if you're in an organization for quite a long time, your values can start to shift a little bit towards them. So there's not any scientific link between personality and motivation. There is some scientific kind of reports out there about personality linking to competency, especially about being resiliency, and how detailed you are in carrying out tasks. So those can predict job performance to a certain degree, but it still doesn't touch on motivation. What is intrinsically going to get you out of bed, excited to be a Monday person, not like a Friday person just waiting for the weekend as well. So no, Attuned's pretty unique that we are looking at values and intrinsic motivators, and really specifically, it's not personality. There are overlaps, so as Christine mentioned a couple times, is you like people, you might be generous type of thing, but your social relationship needs are low for intrinsic motivators. Those aren't necessarily conflicting things, but maybe when you're looking at the report, you misinterpret this. We've had some of our customers per se say, hey, I'm a really innovative person. Why is my innovation so low? I think I'm really creative. I have all the ideas in my company. But maybe that's not your main motivator. You're just motivated by different things at work, but just naturally your personality is quite creative, looking for different kind of ways to solve problems. So yes, the values and your motivations do interlink with your personality, so it is a little complex there. But basically, we're not looking at personality here. So we're trying to give you another set of data that you haven't necessarily had before as a manager to understand people's motivations. With the personality, still going to have to bring in some of that art of management with the data that we're giving. So I think for at least the foreseeable future, it's still going to be art plus data. And there's not enough data compared to the art that you need to be a good manager and to do good one-on-ones with all these complexities going on. Wonderful. We appreciate everybody joining us today. So this was Christine here.
Yes, thank you for having me.
You've been wonderful, and I was Casey. You can contact us on LinkedIn or try to find our email addresses, but of course I encourage you to take the free trial at attuned.ai, find out about your team, and then try to do more motivating one-on-ones because you personally understand it.
And what they value.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.